Welcome back to The Last Place on Earth. Today we have a special guest with us, Konrad of Punter's Politics. Good to have you here, Konrad.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, you're a creator across various platforms. You do Instagram, you do YouTube, you do a podcast.
LinkedIn. whatever it is, I'm on it.
How would you describe the purpose of what you're doing? What are you trying to do?
What I'm trying to do is take the everyday Aussie punter that doesn't have time to engage in politics, and to be honest, shouldn't have to, and give them just simplify what has been set up for us as politics is made deliberately complicated, deliberately opaque, and deliberately irrelevant. So rightly so, Aussie punters are just tuned out. And then politicians run rampant by, hanging out with all their corporate pals and writing rules for that. And so what I'm trying to do is make politics practical, understandable, and relatable for everyday Aussie punter so they can pay attention just this much so that the politicians work out that we're looking at what they're doing and then they start listening to what we want, rather than if we're not paying attention to what they do, they're just going to serve their own vested interests and, whoever's paying them. Because lobbyists are always going to pay attention. If we slack off and stop paying attention, then they just work for the lobbyists. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is go, I understand why you've disengaged in politics. Let's just pay attention for like a little bit more every time an election comes around so that we can hold these politicians to account.
So what about for you? What was your kind of first political engagement? Like, when did you become interested in politics, and what did that look like for you personally?
I think the journey of getting involved in politics reflects my audience at the moment, because most of my demographics are like millennial on either side, but the peak is in millennials. And I think that was my journey as well. You finish school, you go, all right, I need a job, I need to get on with life and work out what the hell I'm supposed to do. And then you start working, you get a job, and you start going, okay, like I should be getting ahead. Maybe I'll get a house. Oh, hang on. What's going on here? If I map my trajectory from here, I'm not going to end up where my parents were. And that's at that moment there, like 25, 26, 27, is when I started to wake up and go, hang on, this system isn't functioning how I thought it did from just growing up. And then you engage in politics, and what you see what I saw first off was just people arguing over stuff that really should have solutions and it should be solved. And it becomes really obvious when you look at US politics. Like, they're still arguing over abortion. They're still arguing over medical system and whether they should have universal health care or not. And you look at that and go, you should be able to, we have answers to that. We've solved it. We look at us and we go, oh, look, like no kids are dying in school shootings. Wow, that's amazing. Solved it. But they're still fighting it. But then you look at our problems and you go, hang on, well, we're still fighting over, more different issues. Whether we should ban gambling advertising or things like that. And I think as I paid attention to politics, I realized what I was being fed, what they're talking about, what passes as politics is this beauty pageant distraction about issues that don't relate really to anyone, that just divide everybody, get everyone fighting and think they're talking about politics. But really, if politics is about how we as individuals live life together and sort out difficult challenges and make community better and solve everyday practical things, what we're talking about isn't anything to do with that, anything practical. And so that's kind of the journey, me not paying attention, then realizing that we're just fighting over trivial things. And then I started listening to a podcast called Freakonomics, and I just realized, there are answers to these questions. Like the questions like, what is a good level to have a social welfare net? One party will say, you can't have it too high. Everyone will just quit their jobs and everyone will be lazy. Lifters and leaners. We had that conversation. And then I listened to this Freakonomics where economists just look at other countries and look at the data and go, well, in fact, this level, if it's this high, it's probably disincentivized work. If it's this low or too punitive, people get trapped on it and don't go back into work. So it needs to be this level. And that would be a good starting point. We can stop fighting about it. Just look at the examples. And that's when I just thought, we have solutions to these problems. For a lot of the things we agree on it. We know what the solutions are. Why aren't we doing it? And I think that was the beginning of me just going, why don't we talk about what matters? Really? Yeah.
So your kind of slogan, I guess, is policy over party.
Yeah. Got
that written on the shirt?
Yeah, right there.
Great shirts, by the way. You've got a great merch line.
Hey, thank you. Funnerspolitics.com.
So I'm kind of interested in that, because where does ideology come into that? Because you've got policy on the one hand, and I feel like that's kind of what you're just talking about there. There's discrete issues where it's like we can work them out. You've got political parties, and there's kind of tribalism that comes with that. And then there's ideology, which kind of maybe can be a bit of a dirty word sometimes, but it's like there are values and beliefs that underpin all of us and what we do. So does that figure into the way that you think about these things at all? And I'm not asking you to pigeonhole yourself with one ideology, but where do you see that fitting in?
I think we all operate from some level of an ideology, but when I look around, people don't identify with it as much anymore.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's plenty of reasons why, and I think it's now been co-opted as something to hide something else behind. So if we look at the Liberal Party today, right, you get a Liberal Party politician sitting here and go, what do you believe? What does the Liberal Party stand for? They'll be like, listen, we want minimal government intervention. We believe in individual responsibility and everyone taking charge of their own life. And I can sit there and go, yeah, I agree. And you want minimal government intervention, do you? So how many nuclear plants did you want the government to buy?
Yeah.
Oh, and how much money are you giving to fossil fuel industries? Right, sorry, I'm just minimal government intervention, but you want to cut social safety. Oh, right, you want minimal government intervention for poor people to help them. Right, let's get specific about this. And so in that case, in that example, they're hiding behind an ideology. And I wonder if we've just kind of gotten sick of having to cut through people's when they say, I stand for this, and then we see that they're hypocrites. And so I guess I've just avoided that altogether, gone ultra pragmatic and gone for me, maybe it looks like ideology is too easily weaponized into tribalism.
Yeah.
I believe in this. And I think, I don't know, I can listen to anyone. Like I said, I can listen to the Liberal Party supporter, I can listen to the Libertarian, and I can go, oh, I believe in a lot of those things too. I think individual responsibility is really good. Or then I can sit down next to a greenie and they'll be like, listen, I think we need to fix systems and structures so it's a level playing field for everybody. Oh, yeah, I can get on board as well. And so I guess from that stance, I could zoom out far enough and go, well, I think democracy is a value I hold and it should serve the most amount of people and provide the most amount of opportunity for the most amount of people. But pragmatically, we can identify with the ideology that we have and build groups around it, and that's helpful and necessary. But for me, when people have just completely checked out and disengaged, I've just gone straight to the most practical version. What is politics? Just devoid of all that, because maybe I think everyone believes, to be honest, everyone without having to articulate it believes in the same thing. You want a fair shot, I want a fair shot, you want to help as many people as you can. Everybody, no matter across the board, kind of thinks that. So if I go, well, here's a policy that actually makes life better for 80% of working class Australians, why would you be against it?
Yeah. And
you could hide behind an ideology and say, well, because of these reasons, and that's fine. But I think it could potentially get in the way of just a pragmatic discussion where we can solve a practical issue based on a policy.
Because I think one of the interesting things here is that across the broad ideological spectrum, there are actually a lot of things that most people agree with, and they're not the things that we're being sold by the two major parties. One of the interesting things to me about your work is the way that it does appeal to people across the ideological spectrum. And I kind of first noticed you, I don't know exactly when, probably a year or more ago, but I was seeing your videos being shared by my lefty climate activist friends. But then I was also in a heap of I used to spend a lot of time kind of for research purposes in conspiracy Telegram groups or freedom groups, right-wing adjacent stuff, and your stuff was getting shared there too. And that's what made me kind of take notice of it. It was okay, this is connecting through. So I guess I'm curious as to how does kind of issues of left, right politics, those kind of traditional political boundaries figure into the way you think about what you do?
I kind of, in a idealistic frame of mind, if I go, what am I trying to do? I guess I'm trying to look at the political landscape that I think is just complete BS. I think the left, right that we are handed, once again, the example with the Liberal Party. Are you really, you're right wing, Peter Dutton's right wing. Why do you want a government-owned energy provider?
Yeah.
Greenies would freaking love that.
Yeah.
You
Konrad
change
Dutton's public energy plan. Yeah.
You change nuclear to something else, or or also invest in other forms. But everyone's on board. Yeah. So it's but now he doesn't fit right wing. But as long as we kind of have that BS structure that we put over the top, the left and the right, that it almost seems like that structure forces us to fight about the small percentage of stuff we actually disagree about. And so I guess what I'm trying to do is reshape what political engagement looks like, reshape what the political landscape is, if that's even possible, by almost pretending as if the left and the right don't exist. Like you said, I got Pauline Hanson supporters in my DMs. I got Greenies in there. I've got a whole bunch of people with different ideas about a whole lot of different stuff. And very practically, can we just come together around this thing we actually agree on and move? Because we think politics can't move forward because we'll never agree on everything. But we don't have to agree on everything. And so that's my ultimate goal, is to go, this left and right is a mad distraction. It's pulling everyone apart. I'm trying to hand them a new dimension to look at it, going, you're fighting with this guy who's the same class as you. Has a similar wage than you. He's dealing with similar problems, the traffic, the healthcare, maybe his insurance premiums have gone up. You're all dealing with the same stuff. You have way more in common. And just because he thinks immigrants are the problem and you think multinational corporations are the problem, there's a common, you're actually, it's you guys versus establishment powers. Because right now, we look at our political system right now, and if you're a millennial or younger, you're going, this isn't working for me at all. And so you then go, well, how do we step forward to change that? And so I think we're held back if we're handed the same left-right divide. So I'm just trying to, I suppose, go, what would it look like if we just pretended that didn't exist and spoke about politics as if it was practical, and realized that even though he disagrees with you on heaps of stuff, if you were to both sit down in a room and pass a piece of legislation about multinational tax avoidance, you get Pauline Hanson on board, you get the Greens on board, and the only
everyone benefits.
the only people you don't get on board
are
the established powers that have bought our power structures as to why it doesn't get passed. Like, why hasn't Labor passed the gambling reform that they wrote themselves with the crossbench that is like, we're here to do it. We have all the numbers. You don't need to work with Peter Dutton. We're here to do it. And they don't do it. Why is that? So I guess, it's like, politics isn't what they're handing to you. And the left and right divide, I think, probably gets in the way more than anything else.
So you're here in Perth in Western Australia. Can you kind of smell the influence of mining companies in the air?
Mate, I was just in town. What do you call it, town, or in the city?
In the city,
Yeah, in Newey. We're like, I went into town. And, mate, it is a shrine to the petrostate that you got Rio Tinto, South 32. I was like, South 32, what did they do? Was that the company that Kerry Stokes is invested in that got an exemption?
That's Beach Energy.
Oh, that's Beach. Yeah. South 32.
South 32, I think, are doing forest mining for minerals. But look, it's hard for even us locals to keep up. There's so many.
I can't remember. I'm pretty sure I did a video, and I'm like, well, it was like I was meeting all the celebrities I've been speaking about forever. I'm like, oh, Woodside. And it is in the air. And I was just at Parliament House talking to some people, and they were like, like this staircase, oil and gas executives.
The secret staircase.
The secret staircase.
That was actually Brad Pettit kind of told that story exclusively on this very couch for the first time.
There you go. So that's the story I've heard as well.
Anyone who's been to Parliament House, there's these weird internal stairs, which are just really for MPs and ministers to quickly run into the chamber and vote. They're not public. They're very narrow, certainly not compliant. And up this very narrow internal stairway comes, led by Minister David Michael, a whole bunch of people from the Chamber of Minerals and Energy and other key peak lobby groups. Up the back stairs, not up the public stairs, around the corner into the Premier's office. Now, later on, I was outside the Premier's office. This is probably about 45 minutes later. They all come out again of the Premier's office, down the stairs, out into what's called the Fern Garden, where often they do media. And then the Minister and the Premier together stood and basically repeated the lines that I'm sure they had worked up together. And I just thought, wow, that if you could distill state capture in Western Australia, that's it. That literally you've got industry who has a back door literally into the Premier's office. It feels so broken.
And, of course it's bloody true. Like, how else do you have, because as I'm making a YouTube video here when I'm going through like the influence of the WA government, I'm like, Western Australia, You guys are literally in the heart of the petrostate, and your government is so controlled by the petrostate that your premier could call the prime minister and say, don't you dare pass that environmental legislation, because I just had a meeting with these execs that literally have a secret key to my office, in like, metaphorical key. And the control that they have just comes from just the dominance of one party in here. So I guess, can I feel the influence? Yes, I can.
The crazy thing to me as well about that whole nature laws thing with Roger Cook calling up Albo to tank the nature laws is A, that he did it, that's crazy, but B, that he then bragged to the media about it.
Yeah.
Like we've kind of got a theory here at The Last Person. We talk about it all the time about the West Australian newspaper, Kerry Stokes, his influence in all of this. And Kerry Stokes, through the pages of his newspaper, has created this narrative that what West Australians want is exactly what the resources industry want, exactly what the oil and gas companies want, which is all these projects to be approved, which is all these nature laws to be eroded, which is, unlimited exports, no reservation, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then the politicians are basically the only people still reading the West Australian newspaper.
Yeah.
So no one, as you would call them, the punters, none of the punters are picking that up because it's a pamphlet for the oil and gas industry. But the people who are the politicians. So Roger Cook reads that and thinks, oh, this is what people want. People want me to stand up to the feds and kill the nature laws. Well, actually, that's what Kerry Stokes wants.
Yeah.
But then he goes out there and he brags about it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a kind of a distorted reality here. But it's also hard to see it sometimes, I think, from the inside. Like for us, it's just the air that we breathe, like it's natural. So I'm always curious when people come from over east, because obviously these problems exist throughout the whole country.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
But they feel a little bit
probably because it's
magnified
a smaller it's a smaller city to obviously Sydney, so there's less vested interest, and it's just wholly one vested interest. And then, like when I was just reading about Mark McGowan, takes 4 lobbying jobs, 2 of them with mining cartels.
I think he's up to 5.
Far out. And he can get a pension.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Crazy,
you know what
right?
I say? Give him a pension, right? I will pay you bludgers to never take a job ever again. Piss off.
I reckon if you did that, suddenly some of them would not be so interested in going into Parliament. I think it might take away some of the appeal.
Well, maybe, but then how would you like to maybe work in government for 10 years and then earn 230 grand for the rest of your life?
Oh, look, it's the sweetest deal of all time, right?
And if you're not going to take that, then you should not be. Once again, maybe it would put off the people that want to go into it in the first place, because maybe they know that's where they're heading.
I think that's the mindset for some
and
of them.
And then before his last move was to give 50 mil or something in subsidies to the fossil fuel industry the year before he left, just before obviously he gets his sweet job. And then he makes Gina Reinhart Australian Person of the Year or whatever. If that isn't the blatant, how safe they feel when they literally nominate Australia's biggest welfare queen to be Australian of the Year. This is what we really need to repaint these bludgers that inherit all their wealth, inherit a massive plot of dirt that actually belongs to us, and then ship out of there without paying royalties. Well, she pays some royalties and she pays some tax. She's better than the gas industry for sure. But then as she lobbies, to pay less and less, that's not responsible guardianship. No. Half her industry wouldn't exist without government subsidies. So don't tell me you worked hard for it. I don't get government subsidies. So I don't know. So it's how obvious the fossil fuel interest is here is almost as obvious as it is in Canberra.
I think, though, really, it's actually very misaligned from what, the punters in Western Australia want. And I think that was kind of borne out in the state election that we've just had. We did have definitely Labor well and truly won that election. And
they always do here though, right?
Well, yeah, in recent history at least they have. Yeah, and some of that I think is a hangover from COVID, McGowan, etc. But the interesting thing about that election to me was that you had this about an 18% swing away from Labor, and it wasn't going to the Liberal Party. For the large part, it was going to the Greens, to independents, to minor parties. So I think actually what people want is very misaligned from what the resources industry want, but I don't think that is getting through to the politicians. No. And I think even federally, both major parties have been making a big deal about how WA is key for the federal election. Albo and Dutton seem to be here like every other week, pressing the flesh and talking to people and doing photo opportunities. And yet they think the way to get to WA voters is to just lie down and give the mining industry what they want, or in Dutton's case, he's probably quite happy to do that. But it seems out of touch, I guess.
I feel like that's a idealistic way to look at it, as if politicians actually care what WA voters want. Whereas
true.
I would be more cynical and say, no, they need this petrostate. And if they don't do what the petrostate here want, they not only have to fight off the front of Rupert Murdoch's propaganda machine, then they'd have Kerry Stokes' propaganda machine, which then can influence WA punters. Because if there's one thing I know by doing propaganda, is propaganda works. It bloody works. And if you think that you're not being fooled by an algorithm, then you are gone. It works, and it will change your mind about stuff that you don't even know. And so I think they don't care about the voters. They're afraid of the power of the corporate billionaires. And Albo that's all I see when I look into his eyes. I've met him one time. All I see is fear. He has I can see a story where I've got power now, and I did some good things on the tax cuts, and I've done more good things than the Liberal Party ever would have done. That's what they go to bed telling themselves every single night. Oh, I'm better than the Liberal Party, and you are. Good on you. You are. It's not good enough. And our problems are getting so bad that little incremental, tiny little changes are not going to solve it. And my biggest fear is that by Albo just like doing what he can not to rock the boat enough. Oh, please let me throw pennies to the poor, Murdoch. Can I? One, Murdoch is always going to be against you. Because even if you give him 90% of what he wants, he wants 100% of what he wants, and P. Dutz is going to give it to him.
The other guys will give it to him,
honestly, my advice to Albo, and maybe I'm wrong, but his advices don't seem to be doing that well either. So here's some other free advice: nut up, pick an enemy, and go to town. You see Justin Trudeau's stats after he stands up to the US with tariffs. Trudeau tanking, absolutely about to lose an election. He stands up, looks Trump in the eye and says, you want to fight? Let's fight. And in a very dignified way, being like, you're starting this and I'm just following your lead. Whereas Albo's just stood up today. Oh, okay. Well, that's very disappointing and we won't be retaliating and blah, 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 blah. Like, okay, man. Like,
that's not appealing to anyone, is it?
Nut up, mate. Like, pick an enemy. And fight him.
And go hard.
Just one. Pick a property lobby. He's perfectly positioned. I came from government housing, a perfect story. Pick one enemy. I don't know. But at the end of the day, trying to please everyone.
And as you kind of said, like the more you give them, the more they're going to want to take. They're never going to be happy.
Never.
Like you're just fighting a losing battle. Do you think the power of the Murdoch media, the Stokes media is eroding? Is it as powerful as it once was?
I think we're just seeing a baton pass. I think, like you said, because politicians are still reading it, and then it still shapes our public discourse. So even if no one's reading it, it still shapes what everyone talks about. It shapes what the ABC responds to. It shapes what might be trending on social media algorithms. And I think we're just in this thing where obviously Murdoch's a bit annoyed that he's losing his propaganda empire to now faceless algorithms from US tech billionaires who now control our propaganda machines. We got Musk, who's probably the new Murdoch, who knows. And then we've got, Zuckerberg and these guys like non-transparent algorithms that shape our society and what we see. I think we're just going to, like, by the time Murdoch's powers receded, it'll just be worse with algorithms. So I think it's a changeover. We're just going to be controlled by one and then the other.
Which seems actually even worse.
Potentially,
like,
it potentially could even be worse. Correct. Yeah.
Do you worry as a content creator that you are kind of like at the whim of algorithms? Is that something that you are concerned by? Yeah.
That's why I'm on every single platform. TikTok, Instagram, X, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, YouTube. You name it, I'm on it just to diversify. Like X is a cesspool, but I'm there. I don't read anything, but because like they can tweak the algorithm, they can do whatever. And that's always, I guess, been the case. But Yeah, it's not like I don't necessarily think that they'll be like, oh, we're going to shut this guy down because he's saying too many true things. Not that I put it past. I'm sure there's been some meetings in the lovely big buildings here about me in Woodside, perhaps. They're looking across at a beautiful billboard of my face at the moment.
I'm sure they've got a picture of your face on the wall. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, with like this guy, watch this guy. So, yeah, I think that's once again, our media has always been controlled and still is controlled by an oligarchy of a few very powerful, influential people that will pull the levers of that communication platform to ensure that the rules are made in their own favor. That makes them more money. Like billionaires worked out the biggest hacked. You don't become a billionaire by inventing something or doing something really innovative. You become a millionaire by doing that. That can work in Australia. It's still got opportunity for that. Become a billionaire by making the government just give you taxpayer money for grants and rigging the rules and get free gas. And that's how you become a billionaire. That's how you do it. And they know that. And so the incentive to control what the public is talking about and what the public is focused on, right information, wrong information, I think is the side quest that distracts everybody with whether it's right or wrong, what are people focused on? And if every oligarch has the fingers on the levers of what we talk about, then we'll never talk about the things that actually we need to fix to all improve.
I watched this morning the newest Friendlyjordies video. I don't know if you've seen it.
I am. Yeah.
About the mining industry in Australia.
Yeah.
Guys, they clearly won. They won 100 years ago. Every government that has ever taken them on, and there's been a lot of them, they've all discovered that if you're good at digging, your bonus skill is burying.
And I think his argument, I'll try and summarise it fairly, basically boiled down to you can't stop the mining industry in Australia because they're too powerful. People have tried and failed, so there's no point. What do you make of that as an argument?
I like the history he gives of how he goes through and goes, we tried it here, we tried it there, we tried it there. All really good examples.
It was really well researched.
He's really good at researching this sort of stuff, but he adds a layer that I just can't get on board with. And there's this layer of condescension, and you're an idiot. If you think you don't know this, you're an idiot. And it's not my speed. I'm not going to call anyone an idiot for not paying attention to politics enough to know the beautiful history that he laid out. That's fantastic. I learned something new by watching it. Yeah. Really great sort of stuff. But I think where Friendlyjordies and I really differ is that I like that he exists. I like that he points out good things that Labor have done. And to be honest, what he gave is the best defense of the Labor Party's do-nothing attitude towards this industry that I haven't heard yet. This is the justification, the apologetics that they tell themselves as to why they do it. And it makes sense. It's logical.
There's a logic
it's
there.
reasonable. They're trying something new. His pitch for Future Made in Australia was actually a really good pitch for that. Haven't heard Albo say that before.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I haven't heard him pitch Future Made in Australia in a way that, he's like, oh, it's going to be good for the future, but he just didn't inspire any vision and things like that. And Jordies was able to do that, right? So he's really good in this video, propaganda arm for the Labor Party, which is really good. Like, we need these stories to get on board with. But I don't want to make people feel like idiots if they don't know it. And I don't want to discourage people from trying different things to do different things, because as I was thinking about, I might do a response to it. I don't know. Like, he's bigger than me. He doesn't have to care about what I think and things like that. But I think it's a good opportunity to talk about politics. Like, at the end of the day, he's calling out the fossil fuel industry for being absolute scabs, leeches, parasites on our society, right? He knows that. We agree on that. He knows that they are wrecking our economy, like fully driving it into the ground. Why does our economy suck? Our economic complexity is rubbish because of them. Because of them. I was just talking to an engineer today. From Woodside. I was at the billboard. He's like, oh, hey, man. Like, oh, no. Like, it's super funny. He's like, I mean, I like your stuff. I'm sorry, I work. And he's like covering up his badge there. And I'm like, oh, mate, like, man, at least someone's making some money out of this. Like, good on you. Like, I don't, but he's in engineering. He's like, yeah, I just finished uni. And I'm like, I just don't know what, this is where you end up to go to work. And I'm like, this is exactly right. Because this is your only opportunity, because they suck up all the talent, they suck up all the resources, and they essentially stop our economy. Like, now this civil engineer is working out how to keep gas in these bloody pipes and not pollute everything. And that's his brain power, rather than engineering some like really innovative, great technologies that we can sell overseas and things like that. So it takes all the talent from our industry. So side tangent to kind of be like, I'm not going to blame anyone individually. This is a massive problem. and we need lots of people to try lots of different approaches. It's a multi-front war. So I'm not going to look at someone over on another front that I don't understand the terrain on, that I don't understand their goals, I don't understand their purposes, and I think we disagree. I'm not going to start shooting at them because we have the same goals aligned. So that's where I'm like, I'm not going to shoot Jordies down. Like, I'm not going to, have a go at him because we have the same goals in mind. He might think that it's futile, and maybe he's of the belief that only Labor can save us. I guess I disagree.
It's a scary thought.
In my experience, I'm building a permission structure for Albo and whoever comes after him to ride the wave. And if me trying to change the public's mind, like I don't know who's Geordie's talking to. His comments seem a lot of Labor rusties, like yep, Labor. That's his goal, and that's cool. He's got an audience. That's who he talks to. And I'm just saying it's necessary for him to exist. It's necessary for the people who identify as communists to be like, we need to government own everything. Like it's out there sort of position. But it's a whole ecosystem that works together to edge us in the direction of taxing these blokes and holding these blokes to account. And I think you just need a variance of approach. It's a fair argument, but I just think, what would also help our fight? If everyday Aussie punters understood exactly how this system works. And I'm not going to belittle anyone for looking at the facts and going, hey, that's a bit outrageous. Why can't we have a simple solution? Because the solution is simple. He's just saying, I'm afraid of losing power.
It's not politically simple, I suppose. Like, it's simple in the sense that you could do it, but it's hard to do given the existing power structures we have.
Given the corruption that exists within. Practically, politically, it's a challenge.
But I think then the goal of doing politics is to change what's politically possible. Like his argument boiled down to it's not politically possible.
Yes. And I'm here, exactly, that's a better way to put it. I'm standing there going, I am working on this part of the problem. I'm trying to make sure that when the mining cartels run another campaign confusing a royalty and a tax like they did with Julia Gillard, like he brings up in the video, I am hoping by some deluded thought that with my reach and with my communication that everyday Aussie punters will not be fooled by that campaign, and I'm taking power away from the mining cartels. And he can ridicule me, he can belittle me as much as he might want in that for thinking that naively. But I think it's worth it.
And also change is like the only inevitable thing in the universe. Like people's minds change and political contexts change. So I think it makes sense to push in the right direction. Like his approach in that video seemed very defeatist to me. And I also thought it was interesting that he's recently spent so much time kind of attacking Gina Rinehart and Peter Dutton. So he's willing to attack them when it suits, but maybe not all the time. I mean, another thing that he did, you talked about that confusing between the royalty and the tax, but another thing that I think, especially in WA, we see a lot is the conflation of oil and gas with the whole of the mining industry. And I think he was actually doing that in that video because the people he's talking about, the Australia Institute, some of the Teal independents, most of the time they're actually just talking about oil and gas, which is actually quite different in terms of what it gives to the WA economy and the national economy. So.
And you've got to start somewhere with the worst issue in oil and gas is the worst one. Like if you ask me personally, 12% royalty on a resource, it's pretty rubbish.
It's still low.
It's such a joke, once again.
But at least it's not like robbery, which is
exactly. So let's start with the robbery. That's exactly right. And I think when you're playing party politics and when you're barracking for a team, your approach is different and your threats are different. And so, he hammers the Australia Institute, right? I get called an Australia Institute shill all the time. And
I've copped that one a bit as well. And
it's like, is there research wrong? Like, don't give me money. They just do good research. They help communicate things. And I mean, Geordie's anyone. If their research is wrong, let me know. I would love to know if they've done it. And obviously he's saying it's not with the context of what's politically possible. And that's fine. You can have that view. But to kind of like, when you play a game of cutting down any perceived enemy to your current power, Labor's in power now. So I'm an enemy because I'm criticising, whereas I actually think I'm an ally to the Labor Party because a party must have, like, the party machine and democracy as it functions here in Australia, you need people to hold you to account. I am part of the political process, looking at Albo saying, you bloody said you would do that, so do it. And with all of us saying, do what you bloody said, he looks over and goes, I better, because you're my power base. And so I'm actually on that team.
The context for him to do that.
But people look at me and go, you're criticising him, Dutton's going to get in. We don't live in America. We don't have their voting system. There is no such thing as if I criticise Albo, people still put Albo above Dutton.
Yeah.
Albo doesn't not get in because I criticize him.
Yeah.
People can understand the fact that they can put someone above and go, well, I guess he's slightly better, but I'm still not happy.
Yeah.
And we're allowed to do that in our system. So when you play the game of like attacking anyone who attacks your power base, you're going to have different enemies, I suppose. And I just think, I don't know, the left eats itself all the time with its purity codes, and it's like, oh, well, you used a plastic cup one time, and oh, you're not a vegetarian enough, or you're not vegan, like, and it just erodes itself. And I see this as a version of that, which is why I don't really want to like be going, you know, back and forth, toe to toe with him, because I'm on his team. Like, so it's like maybe for him, maybe he doesn't even know who I am because I know he doesn't watch my social media.
I don't know. I think he probably does.
His team probably does.
Yeah, I think they've made some fairly pointed references.
Yeah,
right?
fairly direct references, but no fully direct ones.
Yeah.
But you know, like if he, in his mind, I'm attacking his power base and I'm naive and silly and don't know enough, that's fine. In my head, we're on the same team. In my head, he helps inform people and pulls out information that we need, and I'm trying to do that too. So I think we're pulling the same direction. He can say, well, but you're not going to pull as far as I am. I'm like, well, we can hop off the bus at different stages. And we'll just pull together for now and let's see how far we make it, because we're probably not even going to make it that far.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that really has been a massive problem in the last decade or more, which is that we've just looked for the things that divide us rather than the things that unite us, rather than the things that we agree on. And I think that is changing. I think that that's shifting, but I think that some of the kind of turmoil that we see around the world is because of that dynamic where we're just fragmenting further.
The US is the ultimate, isn't it? It's got the double haters. It's like what you're witnessing in the US is like the end of what democracy looks like. That goes. I was even talking to a bloke, and he's like, oh man, I love that Trump won. I'm like, oh yeah, like why? Like what policy do you think that's your life's gonna? He's like, oh nah, I just loved seeing my liberal friends cry. It was just so good. And I'm like, whoa, so you're voting for someone to upset somebody else. That's your voting process. And that's what it's become. It's like Trump is so good at triggering the libs. He's so good at it.
He's the best performer of all time.
And they take the bait. So the left, to their not credit, they're like, what'd you say? How dare he? How dare? Like they know he won the election by pointing at how dare he, how dare he. Then they run a whole election campaign on he's abhorrent. How could you? Basket of deplorables. They literally ramped that campaign up into this, and Trump just leans into it unapologetically and just dominates the whole thing. And that's what they do. So I mean, that's where we can end up if we want to keep dividing over something, and we divide over more and more trivial things, and then you do get gridlock in democracy. Whereas I do think that you can. I was talking to Senator Jared Rennick. Like recently, he hit me in the emails, and he wanted to talk about oil and gas. I was chatting to him on the phone. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure he's not on board with climate change.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. And I'm pretty sure he's probably anti-vax adjacent or something like that.
I'm not sure. He's a bit kooky, right?
You'd see clips and be like, oh, and the left would be like, oh, this guy, he's a racist, whatever. I was talking to him about tax policy, taxing corporations, gas taxes, all those sorts of things. Yeah. He bloody sound like Max Chandler Mather. Those two could sit in a room on that topic and they would, and because Jared's done a lot of tax, his background's in tax, and he's sitting there and he's explaining, it's above my pay grade at least, here's how they shift the profits, here's how the thing makes sure they never pay tax. And I'm like, huh. And then some smart Greens nerd would be sat there and go, yeah, that's exactly right. It could be such a functional democracy where they go, well, we're still going to fight about climate change. But we're just going to pass this multinational tax avoidance right that.
Yeah. So you talked earlier about politics kind of looking like a beauty pageant. And I think in the US, obviously, that's just like
the ugliest beauty pageant you've ever seen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Do you think we're headed down that path? I mean, there's been a fair bit of talk about Dutton kind of adopting some kind of Trumpian
Timu Trump
style. Timu Trump.
That's a funny one,
Yeah. Do you think we're headed down the path of the US?
I guess we'll find out in a couple months. I would say at the moment, no. Because the last election, I'm pretty sure ScoMo tried a bit of this Trumpist, sensationalist stuff, and it looked as if the Aussies just went, piss off, mate. Yeah. And I hope no, and I think no because of something Chaz Lucidello, I was chatting to him on the podcast, and he said this. I was like, what do we have hope for? And he's like, in the US, because, in US and Australia, most people don't give a shit about politics. That's the way it is. But in the US, you don't have to vote. So you've got two extremes. Very extremes that control the parties, and the parties are like the candidates, and you get two very extreme polarizing options, and you have to flick between wasted votes and all those sorts of things. But in Australia, the majority that don't give a shit, they have to vote.
Yeah.
So the parties have to appeal to your everyday Aussie punter that does not care. And the everyday Aussie punter that does not care about politics, to their credit, they don't get caught up in the hype.
Yeah.
They don't get caught up in the sensationalist, whatever, culture war debate that ignites flames online.
Yeah.
They know when something sounds a bit ridiculous and they have to appeal, and it moderates a little bit. And so I think because of a few mechanisms, preferential voting and mandatory voting, I would think we're not headed that direction.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we could not, because algorithms are getting more sophisticated. We're getting more polarized. Everyone's reading different information with different echo chambers, and we're kind of isolating a little bit more. So we've got now more sophisticated tools that could begin to chip away at some of our safety mechanisms in our democracy. So I'm holding out the final judgment for this election. Like, are we headed a direction where we can opt out of the two major system when we look at the two majors and we go, I see you're both controlled by the same interests. One might be more helpful than the other, but I see the same interests there. I'm going to vote outside that. And then if they want to get my vote, they can work out, it's actually a bit of an anchor to take money from fossil fuels. Let's not take their money this time, and then they might get more votes, right? So,
or just kind of just become increasingly irrelevant going down the path that they're on.
And they'll respond to incentives eventually. They're slow to respond, but they will. And that's why when independents come up, and people almost lose their seat, and that happens enough times, you watch the Labor Party rethink their base policies. This is why I say just policy over party, because parties change all the time. The Liberal Party of now is not the Liberal Party of 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Same with the Labor Party. So why would you support the Labor Party the whole time? You could have loved Bill Shorten's plan for the Labor Party and find Albo just milk toast, Malcolm Turnbull grade, like neoliberal, not that interesting. And then you hop off the train, and then if Labor change and adapt and come back to what maybe Bill Shorten's policies or some other versions of it, maybe you hop back on the train. Like, it's okay to jump in and out. Like, I see no benefit in joining a tribal party and identifying with the thing and, go as far as you want to go with a party. Like, people with the Greens, Greens have such bad rap and a bad stigma. You're not going to agree with everything. There's some purple haired hippies with dreadlocks that people go, it's not my vibe. Like, I use deodorant. It's cool. Like, it's not my speed. But you might go, you know what, but I could hop on the train this far.
Yeah.
And then for whatever reason, if we ever make it that far and you guys are a little bit wanting to socialize too many things, I might hop off and jump on the one going the other way. And I think that's how we got to think about it. For this election, this time, you might want to vote for certain parties and go as far as you hope they can take you. And when you get there, hop off and maybe you got to go the other way.
Yeah. All right. I want to play a round of a game, which I think you invented, called Conspiracy or Coincidence. I've got something to run by you, all right? So I'm going to read you this news article, or the first little bit of it, that was published today by WA Today.
Who owns that paper, by the way?
That's a Fairfax paper, yes. It's owned by Channel 9. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's not a paper. It's an online site. Okay. Headline is, Company at Centre of WA Election Furor donated thousands to Labor last year. A subsidiary of the company that won an $86 million tender to recruit, train and manage 7,000 election staff on Saturday donated more than $67,000 to WA Labor last year. Recruitment firm Purcell Kelly is at the centre of controversy surrounding the execution of the election on Saturday, which was beset with issues including booths running out of ballot papers, untrained staff, and a glacially slow vote count. It's a Singaporean company. I believe it's also done work for various mining companies that operate in WA. What do you say? Conspiracy or coincidence or something else?
Wow. So there's so they've privatized? They've
for the first time
outsourced.
ever, they outsourced election day in WA. Yeah. It does seem crazy, and there were around here, this area, there were voting booths which were turning people away because they'd run out of ballot papers.
They were turning people away.
Saying, "I'll go to this other polling booth," which is now part of the reason why the vote has taken so long, is because there are a lot of absentee votes because people were moving around. Apparently, there was a Labor MP on the radio this morning who was saying she rocked up to vote and her name wasn't on the roll. And she was that
happened to a Labor MP.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like there's various other stories I've heard about the count and whatever, but it sounds like it was incredibly disorganised. It was the first time they'd ever privately outsourced it. And I mean, the WA Electoral Commission, I mean, they do various things, but really they've got one main job, right?
Once every 4 years, blokes.
Yeah.
This is why you exist.
Yeah.
Oh, like the thing that I'm always very zero tolerance around questioning our electoral system, because I think that's such a low. We have an independent AEC, it's run independent, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm always like zero tolerance on like people being like, oh, well, if I lose, it's rigged, because that's a very American topical thing.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't impugn that level of conspiracy, but I cannot personally get past the privatization of something as fundamental and as important as something like this, especially with all I keep discovering about how much more efficient for certain things the government is.
Yeah.
There are certain things the government does really, really well. Taking money from people, giving people money. This is like its number one job. And when you compare superannuation to the pension system, it's like a Cam Murray example. That's like the greatest example that I've seen that is about how much more efficient the government is at administering pension payments. It employs half the people, delivers double the benefits. And our super system delivers half the benefits, double the people. It's so inefficient. And so if you're going to pay a private corporation to come and do this, you have to pay CEO bonuses, shareholders, all this sorts of stuff. And then this happens. It's like, yeah, it must be coincidence. Like, oh, well, like, no, it's totally cool. And are they going to like ditch this and never do it again? Or are they going to push on?
Good question. I mean, I think there's a fair bit of pressure on them to do that, particularly coming from the Nationals. Shane Love, the Nationals leader, is pretty disgusted by what went down. I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I don't think there was any kind of bias or rigging or whatever of the election. Yeah. I mean, I think those political donations to Labor, that's interesting, kind of pretty bizarre.
How can they be allowed to do that?
Yeah.
Like, and it could be as simple as like, because I'm very slow to conspiracy, honestly.
Yeah.
Which is why it's pretty crazy what we're looking at. The obvious conspiracy is, we want this contract. Because what private corporations do to become billionaires, they go, man, how good would it be to have a monopoly? Oh, we'd make so much money for a monopoly. How do we get a monopoly? We'll give them government money. And then they will outsource to you, and you will have a government-sanctioned monopoly. This is an oligarchy. This is crony capitalism. This is what we're moving into. And for the Labor Party, of all parties, to do that, knowing the benefit of government-run things, well, they used to. Once again, they've shifted as well.
Yeah.
To want to pay CEO bonuses. So the obvious conspiracy that I will 100% sign on the dotted line for, like I won't go as far as rigging votes and things like that. That's a serious. I'd need a lot of data to suggest that. But the fact that they would obviously donate to the Labor Party, well, of course it would be, because they're the ones in government and they want this contract. And look, they got the contract. And if they keep the contract, then I wonder how much they gave him enough to turn a blind eye to their first debacle in such a critical, conspiracy or coincidence, really critical seat that's come down to the wire that's had these issues when there's 34 votes in it or whatever the count is at now.
Yeah, yeah. So that's in the seat of Fremantle right now. Labor is leading by 34 votes. The independent Kate Hewlett has been leading the whole time along up until now. So, yeah, it's you'd want people to be pretty careful with that.
You want people you trust, and you don't even want the appearance of conflict of interest. Yeah. And the fact that the Labor Party have done that.
I mean, that's the thing. This to me really is a pretty good example of how we're just privatizing so many things, including things that there's just no good reason need to be privatized. It just seems kind of pretty insane to me.
And that's the patterns that I'm always just trying to point out to people, because once again, guess who's on a unity ticket on that issue? Jared Rennick of the right, Greens of the left. They are both happy to nationalize critical infrastructure back, like ports, things where there is no competition, things where nobody can compete in it. You can't privatize a railway because there's no competition. And then what we have are these pseudo markets where the government regulates these monopolies with a whole bunch of onerous rules, and it gets complicated and things like that, all to keep paying these. All they're doing, all this privatization is, and this is something I'm trying to communicate in all my podcasts and stuff, is that they're going, man, it's so great that the government just gets money from people every single month. It's so good. They just give it to them. and they have to. Oh, how do we privatize taxes?
Yeah.
How do we force Aussie punters to give me like toll roads? That's a tax that you can't avoid because you don't have them over
Luckily,
here. So
something that we don't have.
So
here.
that's
We've
actually
avoided that one today.
big respect to that because
But
Sydney,
don't give them any ideas. Yeah.
Sydney is flipping horrible. And it's now the ship sailed, right? These corporations don't even pay tax, but that's what it is. It's a poor person tax. If you're poor and you have to use this road, you rather than give your tax to the government, here's the best thing about taxes. Here's my pitch for taxes over private entities.
Yeah.
When you give the government money, they have to give it back to you. Right? And we argue about how they give it back to us and how much they give it back to us, right? But if they spend it on schools, hospitals, roads, teachers, whatever it is, right? Investing in new businesses, giving making sure that new businesses can start and innovate and new technologies and blah, blah, blah. They've taken that money that we gave them and it's cycling back in. And if done well, it could create a new business hub over here where small businesses actually start to thrive. It could create new public transport that speeds up your commute by 15 minutes a day at its best form. That because you gave them that money as tax. Whereas when I give my money to the toll in Sydney, that's like, I don't even use it. I have tolls off because I just can't afford. It's like $20 to go one way in.
Crazy.
Which is crazy. And what they do with that money is one, they don't even pay tax on it. So not even a fraction of it comes back to me in taxes. It goes offshore through a Cayman's account because they separate. I don't know. Michael West is good at explaining how it sort of does. One entity has the debt, never pays tax. Another entity is like some kind of stapled trust or something like that. That's what it's called. And it just siphons offshore, never to be seen again. So your money just out it goes, and that's a tax. That's a tax.
And just hearing you talk about that actually makes me feel angry. And I think that is the thing that, as you say, across the political spectrum, it makes sense we're angry about that, right? Like we don't want our money being
Let's
taken.
start there.
Yeah.
If you're angry about tolls and I'm angry about tolls, we
sort
can
that
make
one
our
out.
lives better right now by telling these guys to get out of our bloody road system that we built, that you bought for a fraction of the price, and that you keep indexing every year above inflation.
Yeah.
And the government's agreed to that and they've sanctioned it.
Yeah.
Nuts.
Crazy. You just mentioned teachers there. I want to ask you a little bit about your former career because you're a school teacher, right? As was I. I did 5 years of English teaching.
Oh, English.
Yeah.
I get those vibes.
What did you teach? What was your...
I used to teach PE
Yeah.
and like year 10, 11 economics and business.
Yeah.
Was probably my subjects.
Yeah. So has things you learn as a teacher or ways you communicated as a teacher, have you brought those with you into your new career?
Yeah, probably. Like trying to stand in front of a class and gain the attention of like 25 teenagers that don't care about what you're talking about. It's probably shaped how I communicate certain things and try and just always cut to, if I have their attention for 15 seconds, what's the thing I'm trying to get through to them?
Yeah.
And I think I've probably carried that through going 15 seconds on Instagram. That's all you kind of get, right? And so if I'm going to communicate one thing about that bill that's just passed, because newspapers and politicians, they have a way of making things long and more complicated than they need to be. Academics, God love them, we need them, but they cannot communicate to anyone else
needs to distill it.
other than themselves. And that's why I'm happy to try and understand it the best I can, because I'm not an academic. And I'll distill it. It won't be fully accurate. It won't include all the nuance, but it's going to be the cliff notes that roughly remain the same. So I feel good when an economist's work that I use or someone I go, hey, like this is me trying to summarize what you're saying. Is that roughly? When they're like, yeah, it's pretty much, like technically, but that's pretty much it. Then I'm like, okay, excellent. So yeah, that's definitely shaped how I try and distill information that I think is important and outrageous. And if I can make people feel outraged about this sort of thing, then I think it just begins that momentum. Trying to make people angry at the right people. It's bad to say, but trying to go, people are going to try and make you feel angry towards whatever they want that will serve their best interests. So I'm trying to go, well, what makes us angry and who do we point at that serves our best interest? Because there is someone to blame.
Yeah.
Right. And we need to be blaming the right person, because if we're blaming the wrong person, we're wasting our time.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think the school system is doing a good job of preparing students to be good citizens and, a kind of education about how to be politically?
Politically, probably not. But I'm also very soft on teachers because I was a teacher. You're a teacher.
Yeah.
You've been in the system.
I think teachers are great. I think a lot of problems actually with the education system.
Yeah.
But I think teachers do the best that they can almost always. You
Yeah.
know?
And I think they cop it way too much. Obviously,
sure.
I was one,
For
like a
sure.
bias, like parents come in, you don't get any respect as a teacher, like especially like teaching in white kid schools, you know, like where I used to teach a little bit. Like I was at a high immigrant population school in Melbourne. Wow. Immigrants respect teachers.
Yeah,
You sit down, they
that's
go,
true.
listen, how can he help? Oh, you're a professional. You've studied this? Excellent. I'll listen to some advice that you might say. Whereas like these, like, I don't know, tradie parents or just like they walk in, they go, I don't need school. You don't need school. Here's, like, I don't know if you've had that experience.
sure.
Like,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
son's wrong, right? You're an idiot, blah, blah, blah. Like, you drive some crappy car. It's like, yeah, because I don't get paid that much.
Yeah.
And so obviously I'm jaded because of that. And teachers cop, they're always, police and teachers are always just at the bottom end of like when something's wrong in society, oh, it's teachers' fault. Oh, it's the policing fault. Like there's a whole system above it. So I'm always very soft. I think the system is obviously needs to be improved, should always be improved. I think the burden is getting harder and harder on teachers to like, this is the first time ChatGPT is the first time that's made a teaching job easier, especially for English. You can just feed that into an AI model and be like, give me some feedback for this kid. Yeah, that's about right. Bang. Like, you know.
But what the kid's feeding you has probably been done by the AI
Yeah,
model
exactly,
too. So
exactly.
it's just AI evaluating AI.
Another skill that they need to learn, right? And so, like, I think the best thing about school, we're always fixating on like what it's teaching them. But I think just being at school around other kids, dealing with different people, selling different ideas, I think there's still no replacement for that. And I have a lot of friends that have kids that are like, no, we're going to homeschool. We're going to pull our kids out of school. And I'm like, isolating from society, it's not been my thing. I'm like, I didn't like school at all, but I think I learned a lot there and it shaped me a lot. And, you know, it wasn't the best time. I was bored. I didn't love it, and it could always be better. But I think, you know.
Well, I think, you know, one of the things that like is happening in our society is that people are getting isolated from one another and alienated from one another, especially young people. There's this growing divide between the genders, which is something that really scares me.
Yeah.
But social media often gets the blame for that, which is something that you spend your day doing. And I'm kind of curious, like, how much content do you try and hit in a week? Like, how much do you try and pump out? Because it does seem to be a lot. Yeah.
A lot, yeah. Like, I'm trying to, when the algorithm's paying attention, because I've, you know, been in the space a little bit and I know how hard it is. Like if you're a creator or a YouTuber and you're just trying to put stuff out there, it's so disheartening to go, I'm trying to do this, get no views, the algorithm doesn't pay attention. So when the algorithm paid attention to me, I was like, I have to go now.
Yeah.
So I was making, when it first took off, I was making an Instagram reel a day.
Wow.
Bam, bam, bam. Just every single day for 3 months, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Because I went, it's only going to pay attention for this long.
Yeah.
And I can build a whole platform out of this. And I was just like, okay, it's only temporary, it's only temporary. So now I'm in the pre-election phase where I'm like, it's still only temporary, it's still, because it's like now people are paying more attention. So I'm like burning out 7 days a week. I produce like 2 Instagram reels, 1 podcast, 2 YouTube videos in a week with like different, probably 5 Instagram reels if I clip some of the podcast stuff. So it's too much. It's, you know, it's a lot, but I'm also like, well, when it's paying attention.
Yeah.
Because I have to pass it through the algorithm to show just regular Aussie punters.
Yeah.
Like that's just how it sort of has to work at the moment. So yeah, too much.
Yeah. I mean, I find it interesting because I think social media is like where it's at now in terms of political communication. It's kind of where you have to be. You know, I've dabbled in various short form video and, you know, obviously we're doing the podcast and whatnot. One thing I find is that, like, personally, when I'm spending a lot of time making content, I just get, like, internet addiction and I just get sucked in and I just kind of am scrolling a lot.
How many times you open it?
Like, more times than I could even
was I
notice. Yeah.
What was that? Yeah, it's bad.
Do you how do you deal with that as someone who's making content all the time? Like,
at the moment, I have no balance until the election.
Yeah. So you're all in.
I'm all in. So I'm addicted. I'm like, because I want to see what people are talking about, so I can see information and look it up and things like that. But then what I'm wanting to do is just at a certain time, like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, boom, phone, like lock the app or whatever it is, and just phone just for the rest of the evening, just leave it. I don't need it. I want to like build in those boundaries, sort of things. To try and not, because it does just shape your brain, wire your brain. Before I was doing Instagram, social media stuff, I actually wouldn't scroll reels because they were too addictive. I wouldn't be on TikTok. It's too addictive. I'd be on YouTube. I like YouTube. I think YouTube's great. I walk away from a YouTube sesh and I am like, learned something cool. That was a sort
Yeah.
of review of an electric car that I enjoyed. I learned something random from Mark Rober or some of these random
Or you learned
YouTubers.
some Australian political history from Friendlyjordies.
Exactly. Yeah. Or I see Geordies like absolutely destroy some politician, right? And I'm like, oh, that was fun. And I clicked it and I decided and I chose it, and that's really great because YouTube algorithm I feel like wants to be on my team.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like the Instagram ones, it's like we're going to hold your attention against your will.
Yeah.
We're going to hold it to ransom. And so, yeah, that's what I used to do. Was like I just wouldn't engage in that version of social media. You know, Facebook's useless now, so that's easy. It's only for boomers and
AI.
it's just rubbish memes.
Yeah.
Facebook don't do that. But yeah, since I have to be on it, it's not great. I don't love it.
So you're here in Western Australia because you've got a billboard. If people in WA want to see the billboard, where should they go?
Go to the Woodside building. I don't know the
right,
way, like opposite Parliament House.
I mean, it's that spot is incredible, right?
On the
fact
Channel
that,
9 building.
There's Woodside looming above Parliament House.
Well above.
I think it kind of sums it all up. But now you're up there, right? You're.
I'm up there. So if you're driving past and you see it pop up, there it is. And I'm assured that I spoke to the Woodside employee. He's like, yep, you can walk around the building. Everyone can just look down. So they've got the perfect vantage point for that billboard. So I'm sure in some board meetings, they're sitting there and someone might be just bored gazing out the window and boop, there's my face popping up. So if you want to have a look at it, go for it.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming and joining us on The Last Place on Earth.
No worries. Thanks for having me.